Welcome back, Tribe. We're here today with special guest Kenpo Joe Ravello, and today we're going to be discussing a pioneer in the martial arts here in the United States, David German, one of the forerunners of mixed martial arts, and Kenpo Joe is going to fill us in all about it. Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing great, sir. Great to be back on the show, and great to be talking to the tribe about one of the legends of Kenpo as well as MMA in this country.
Joe, now this is going to be the first in a series that we're going to be doing as far as profiles on famous martial artists and influential martial artists. Now, speaking to you off air, you were giving me some information about David German, and he is somebody that is very important in the Kenpo world, but less known, I think, to modern practitioners as far as his contributions to the mixed martial arts. So let's get started. Tell me a little bit about who David German was, how he got started in martial arts, a little bit about his career, and then let's talk a little bit more about mixed martial arts.
Certainly. David German was born and raised in California, and as a young boy growing up, he started in martial arts at the Japanese Cultural Center in Covina, California, and his first start was Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and he trained with his instructor, Kimura Sensei. And he was introduced in. He always mentioned it as a children's jiu-jitsu, a lot of escapes from the hold and basic fundamentals. And after he had the foundation in jiu-jitsu, he met up with Al Thomas. Al Thomas is known to many as the founder of Budo Jiu-Jitsu. And most people are familiar with Budo Jiu-Jitsu through a project that Al Thomas did in the early 1980s with the MCA of film studios, known as the World of Martial Arts. And it's a wonderful VHS tape, and it actually was the first pioneer laser disc that actually featured martial arts in an instructional format. It was really cutting edge at the time. It featured such individuals as Gracias Casillas, Benny the Jet Ortiz and his brother Ruben, Steve Mohammed, back then Steve Sanders. It was a really great combination of various famous martial artists who joined together for this project. Al Thomas was known throughout the area for his instruction in the law enforcement field. As a matter of fact, I did a great interview with Benny last year at the Action Martial Arts event, talking about his career with that, and plan to feature these different individuals who were featured in the event, in the video. But David German, had trained with Al Thomas in Budo Jiu-Jitsu and received his black belt from him at the Budokan in El Monte, California. And so he had a foundation in Jiu-Jitsu, and there's a great story. His father was a mechanic by trade, and one day they had brought an automobile down to Pasadena, California, to a auto mechanics place, which still is there to this day, by the way, on Walnut Street in Pasadena, California. And around the corner from the repair place was Ed Parker's original Kenpo karate studio. And Jeff David had found out that location, and he talked to his dad about taking classes. And at the time, I think private lessons were a whopping $5 for a private lesson with Ed Parker. So here was young David taking classes with Al Thomas in Budo Jiu-Jitsu, and then taking private lessons from Ed Parker personally in Kenpo karate. And his mind was already working. His mind, because each one of his instructors knew about the other, and they would say, so, Ed Parker would say, well, what Al Thomas teach you today? And Al Thomas would say, well, what did Parker teach you today? And they would work with each other, and they would either create a counter to the various techniques or show them how they could enhance that. And of course, David, being a young, innovative mind, he would sit there and try to blend each one of the arts, how one worked and the other stopped and whatnot with each other. And he was very fortunate. Again, this is the 1950s when he was training with both of these gentlemen. And Mr. German eventually got his black belt from both Al Thomas and as a teenager, and Ed Parker. And he would always tell me different stories. I remember we talked about the black belt form in Kenpo Form 4, and he was asked, while working with Mr. Parker and studying with him, if he could teach a young Tino Tiliasega, the founder of Lima Lama, black belt form 4. And he worked with people like Chuck Sullivan and Dan Inosanto, all when they were studying Kenpo with Ed Parker. And he was always fascinated where one art stopped and another began, and always looked for ways to infuse the two arts. And in 1961, he actually opened up two Ed Parker franchises in Las Vegas, Nevada, rather. And due to that, he became involved with the Las Vegas scene and many of the celebrities. His most notable celebrity student was Wayne Newton. And there's an interesting story about when Wayne Newton came to train with David German. He had been getting teased and picked on, for lack of a better term, on television through the then stand-up routine of the famous actor and then comedian McLean Stevenson, who most people know from his role as Colonel Blake in the TV series MASH. And unfortunately, in his routine, he would question, everything from Wayne Newton's masculinity to his sexuality. And Wayne was very upset about it, and he had come to Mr. German, basically said to him, sir, told about the story, he said, sir, I want you to make me a mean son of a bitch in the valley. And he started training with David. David at that time was doing an infusion of Kenpo into the grappling. And what caused David to break away from Mr. Parker was not something on his part, but what happened was Mr. Parker was coming into Las Vegas to do a demonstration. And at the end of the demonstration, again, remember, Mr. German owned two Ed Parker franchises in Las Vegas. So at the end of the demonstration, Mr. Parker said, "Look, I want to introduce my man here in Las Vegas," and so obviously a young David, who paid for his franchise fees, was there with his father and family and students, and obviously Mr. Parker was going to introduce him, and he ended up calling up the Shotokan guy, who is a local martial artist who had nothing to do with Mr. Parker, and he was devastated. He was completely devastated, and afterwards, they approached Mr. Parker, and Mr. Parker apologized for what happened, but the damage had already been done. So when David went home with his father, he always told an important story. He says that his father, for the first time, two things he had never done his entire life as a child. First of all, he told his son that he loved him, and second of all, he told him he was proud of him and his accomplishments. David went home and got actually back to the studio, took the Kenpo karate off the wall, and decided to figure out a term that he could use, because he that day he knew he would never work with Mr. Parker again. And an idea that was bouncing around to his head, because he'd been looking at both of the arts and incorporating the arts at the various transitional points of those arts. So he decided to call his art TAI, Transition, Action, Incorporated. And so Thai karate was born. Now, Thai has had different incarnations and different names over the years: Thai karate, Thai kung fu, Thai Kenpo. But it's always been an infusion of various martial arts. Ed Parker's Kenpo, Budo Jiu-Jitsu. Later on, he would work with Wei Feng Du through one of the students, again, Brian Adams, who was the person who wrote the first black belt thesis for Ed Parker, which became the book The Medical Implication of Karate Blows. And another gentleman is Parker Linnigan, who was a well-known martial arts instructor in the California area as well, and had also studied different Chinese martial arts, and influence from David German and other instructors as well. So at the time, David was very controversial. Again, he was considered a real maverick by many people in the martial arts community. Again, many people throughout the martial arts world clearly recognized that David German, simply stated, did the smoothest transition from Ed Parker's Kenpo into the grappling arts that there was. And it was very important because, again, with the advent of mixed martial arts, he really was one of the pioneers for MMA in this country. What he would do is started to create these tournaments, which were mixed martial arts tournaments. And what he would do, the first round you boxed, the second round you kicked boxed, and in the third round you would sit back to back, and each person would have a boxing glove on one hand, and then they would, upon the command, roll back and turn face each other, and they could box, they could kickbox, they could do any of their various martial arts. Again, the boxing glove was to provide a safe padded striking, and again, the other hand was kept there so that they could do various chokes, strangles, and slays, jiu-jitsu techniques. This particular aspect of his tournaments were later incorporated and taken by the Gracies when they had their first boxer enter the UFC. And many of the various aspects from David German's tournaments were taken by the Gracies to be used in the original Ultimate Fighting Championships. So, again, he was very well known. Again, Al Thomas, we mentioned before, was very much involved in law enforcement. Again, people like Benny Zajakides, Chuck Norris was one of his students. Matter of fact, Chuck even did a forward in that videotape talking about Budo Jiu-Jitsu when he studied the grapple arts. And Chuck had actually studied Al Thomas's system and incorporated it into the red belt material for Chuck Norris's system, which still stands as part of the curriculum to this day. So David German was privy to all of that, and he really started to seek his own path regarding what was Thai. So a person might start off with a Kenpo technique from Mr. Parker's system, 5 swords, thundering hammers, and then he would go into stand-up grappling. Again, we are so familiar with the term these days of lock flow. Well, David German had a lock flow set way back in the day called slipping set, and it gave you the foundation of seeing the various locks and how to move seamlessly from one lock to the next. From there, you would then go into the ground set, where you would do a takedown. Normally, one of the techniques that he learned from jiu-jitsu, or later on, he also had a career involved in professional wrestling. Again, many professional wrestlers are also judoka and jiu-jitsuka. And he got involved in professional wrestling and actually had his first match against Freddie Blassie, classy Freddie Blassie back in the day, facing that Baron David Von German. And David appreciated himself to the professional wrestling community, and also had worked with Gene LaBelle. In fact, there's a funny story. David had a very volatile temper. He would always stand up for the little guy, but always, not be afraid to put his body on the line to prove his point. And at one time, he was working with Gene LaBelle, and he apparently copped an attitude with Gene, and Gene broke his leg. And again, I don't know all the details regarding that, but he always mentioned about that. And then I remember I was working with Al Tracy, and Al Tracy mentioned about the first time he met David German, and Ed Parker warned him and said, "Look out, this guy's a grappler." And David shot in, and again, this is where some of the influence of Ed Parker techniques actually did come from David German. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And Al Tracy hit him with a front kick in the face. Again, a lot of the basic grappling counters, some of which were created by David German. There's a wonderful story about a technique that we teach the system, that Parker's system called cross of death against Jujinage, the front two-hand cross choke. And it comes from a wonderful story with Brian Adams. And Brian was working with Mr. German, and he was watching David teach this choke. And Brian was kind of unsure about the effectiveness of the technique. So he would say, well, so David was talking to him, and he said, well, what would you do? Oh, well, I block it, and I ki, and he said, really fascinating. Next thing you know, he jumped in on him, applied the choke immediately, and choked him out, knocked him unconscious. So he obviously woke him up, and after waking him up, he sat there and said, well, it doesn't seem that Samson block and ki worked for you, did it? So Brian was very, very upset, very disgusted about what occurred, and went back to Ed Parker and, told him the story. He said, well, what did he do? Well, he shot him with this, and I said, well, show me what he did. And immediately upon shooting in, Mrs. Parker blocked his elbow from the cross choke and hit him with a standing fist, a sun fist, or a straight blast so the Wing Chun practitioners go right in the face. And that became the foundation for the base technique that we do to this day in American Kenpo, cross of death. Some of the tackle techniques were formulated for Mr. Parker's training in judo as a young boy growing up, but also working with David and teaching David. And this was the key. Mr. Parker was a very open-minded individual, always wanted to learn, and David would cause the impetus for many of those things to occur.
So he left his own mark on the Parker system, even as a student.
Oh, definitely. Oh, no doubt about it. You know, I mean, like I said, I mean, he was again, Mr. Parker was very open-minded and wanted to learn. You know, I mean, in one way, it was sad that an incident had occurred that caused David to create Kai, but in one case, it was one of great impetuses. And David still had incredible respect for Mr. Parker and dealt with him on many occasions. One of the other aspects about David German was his creative thought process. David, during his lifespan, had no less than 65 patents, I should say, regarding different martial arts apparatus. One of his most well-known devices is a training dummy originally called Ninja Man back in the 1980s, which was later renamed Kenpo Man. And David got the idea. Again, his father was an auto mechanic, and what they would do many times is they would take drive shafts that were broken and bring them to the junkyard. And one day David was playing with the central rotational point of the drag shaft with the ball bearings and whatnot, and he got an idea. His father, they lived out in the country, and they had a mailbox, and one of those standalone mailboxes you put on a pole that again, of course, the mailman drives by in his little car and his little van, and he puts the mail in, drives off to the next mailbox. Well, unfortunately, some vandals would drive along sometimes and see it in films and whatnot, where they'll take a baseball bat and hit the mailboxes for fun and whatnot. And they'd done it to his father's mailbox. And he thought to himself, gee, I mean, sometimes you have to worry about the vandalism, or sometimes you have to worry about the safety of walking out into the street to get your mail. So what he did, he took one of these drive shafts and he buried the base of it into the ground, and he put a mailbox on the rotating centrifuge, for lack of a better term. The ball bearing rotation point, attached the mailbox to it, and then he could spin the drive shaft, the rotating drive shaft section, turn the mailbox onto the sidewalk section, get the mail, and then rotate the box back out to the street. Well, he took that basic idea, and he spent one day just playing around, pushing the mailbox back and forth on the rotating pole from the drive shaft, and he's like, hey, I could put an arm here and use it kind of like the Wing Chun dummy and block it. It would spin around and come back the opposite way, and I could block it and different things. And that became the foundation for the Kenpo Man. He then built a base of legs. And again, there was an apparatus that Mr. Parker had made in the 1960s called the Makawara Waza Man. And basically this was a metal framework that was wrapped up with, for lack of a better term, we see pipe insulation. And it was held together, unfortunately, back then by those twisting grommets with screw and the sharp metal ring that you can adjust. And, the basic idea was fine, but what held the pads together really was dangerous. You cut your hands, etc. But for the time, it was very innovative. And David took that idea and ran with it, and then started to create different types of insulation that would hold up to the stand test, and then put vinyl coverings over it. And that became, again, originally the Ninja Man, which if you look at early black belt magazines in the late 1970s and early 80s, you'll see advertisements for it. And incorporated the foundation of legs, like a person in a forward stance, a bow and arrow, a hard bow as in kutsudachi position. So that way you could do the techniques against the bent leg, and you could do techniques against the straight leg. You could various hooks and sweeps and kicking techniques and locks and traps with your legs as well as your hands. And, blocks rotating arms that would spin and attack you. later on he would create two arms and would elaborate from the Kenpo man to the Kenpo warrior. And again, you'll see over the years different people take variations on this ideas, but this is really the first time that was offered in the United States, and his own unique, innovative design. And this was just one of many devices that he came up with to create unique fighting experiences for various martial arts. Again, he was very influential to many people. Again, I mentioned about his tournaments where so many famous martial arts from California would go because it was different. It was one of the first tournaments that really offered your ability to try not only your art, but how you would fare against other martial artists. But not just from other arts in a striking aspect, but grappling. When you talk to individuals like Bill Wallace, many people back in the day, they started training in judo. And a lot of times the only reason you trained in karate because there was no judo schools around.
No,
so a lot of... Go ahead, please.
Oh, Joe, let me ask you now, because this is very interesting to me. The tournaments, you're telling us about the kind of people that came out, and back then things were a little bit different. People were a little bit more separate in the way they trained their arts. How did this go over in general? I mean, were people excited about the idea? Were they curious? Were they leery of it? Were people, jumping out on the mat to try this experience, or was it something that took a little bit more time to draw people out into?
Well, again, all of the above. Some people despised it. I remember in the 1980s, David really came for the forefront of the martial arts community by a series of articles. Black Belt magazine featured him in the early 80s. Matter of fact, they featured him on the cover of Black Belt magazine not once but twice. And he was considered, many people consider him a maverick. He was one of the first people to do this. Many people considered it controversial. Yet, and if you look like Japan, many top-ranked martial artists, like people who are karateka, are also judoka. They do train in both and have rank in both. They had black belt rank in both, and that wasn't unheard of back then. Again, David was influenced by all these different instructors that Al Thomas would bring in. He would work people, and he would be their uke, whether they did karate or judo or jiu-jitsu or naginata or jutsu or kobudo. He would work. He would be the person because he was the guy who swept up the place and cleaned up. And he was a young teenage boy who was willing to learn and willing to get thrown around for the sake of learning a technique or an art. So some of the traditionalists were really against this completely. Like karate is the best. I would never. I wouldn't grapple, or I'm a judo guy. I wouldn't. No karate guy's got the power to hit me and knock me out, or vice versa. So on one hand, he was considered a real maverick, and like I said, he was first one of those people in California to literally mix martial arts. I really feel that term used in California by the Gracies and whatnot was very influenced by David German. And I feel he really doesn't get his proper credit for that. But in the 1980s, like I said, 1979 to 1981 was 1982 was a real renaissance for David German. He was being featured in Black Belt magazine. He was featured in a series of articles in Inside Kung Fu magazine. As a matter of fact, I want to say Mr. Holzer, who wrote the articles for Inside Kung Fu at that time, dubbed David German the eclectic heretic. And again, that's what he was considered. He was a heretic. That the bastards and canons of many of these martial arts, he would confront and question the validity of those individual arts. He was very eclectic. Again, whether it learned the Chinese martial arts of the Northern Southern Kung Fu, whether it was the Japanese arts of Jiu-Jitsu and the Chinese version of grappling known as Chinna, whether it was the art of Kenpo from Ed Parker and the various karate systems, to blend them in that mode. Many people may have done it, but they would not mention it extensively for fear of negativity and condemnation by the martial arts community by and large. David wasn't afraid of that. David embraced that, and in his martial arts career, long before the advent of the internet and 9 million martial arts organizations, in his lifespan, David German was recognized as a 10th degree black belt and the founder of Thai by no less than 20 major martial arts organizations worldwide. Matter of fact, one of the organizations that did recognize him was Kyokushinkai. And Kyokushin Karate Masayama. There's a wonderful picture that in his of that event where his manager, again, David was also because it was in Las Vegas. He used to do numerous demonstrations, and his demonstration became so popular. He worked at many of the various casinos doing demonstrations. Matter of fact, Wayne Newton was so taken with his training with David German, he bankrolled and sponsored David to run a TV show in Las Vegas. And it was called The Art of Karate with David German, and it was on the air in local Las Vegas television for many, many years. And they got incredible amounts of advertising through doing that series. But getting back to the influence, again, I remember I was on an internet podcast radio show similar to this, and the guest was Frank Dukes. And I was talking to him about his early career, and I happened to mention David German, and his whole attitude changed immediately. He lit up, and he said, "Oh, David German, I love David German. David German was one of my greatest inspirations. I used to attend his tournament, and he used to run the first mixed martial arts tournaments back in California. It was incredible. And I competed in them, and suddenly it hit me. I was like, wow, are you telling me that David German's tournaments was one of the influence for your stories about the Kumite?" So you never know who he affected and who he influenced. Again, he had articles that were written by Black Belt Magazine talking about the infusing of different martial arts and cross-training. Mr. German gave a great analogy. He said martial arts are like a track and field event. And, you've got the naturally thin sprinters that are running, 500 meters, 1,000 meters. You have the long-distance runners that are running the marathons. You have the heavyweight, muscular athletes who are doing the discus and the shot put. It's throwing the javelin. But then you have those athletes that combine several of those events into the decathlon, the pentathlon, and of course, now that many people remember one of the most famous athletes in that field, the person formerly known as Bruce Jenner. And also, Dolph Lundgren did a wonderful film called Pentathlete, working about 5 different techniques, which everything from track and field to shooting. And he said, some people are specialty athletes. They'll specialize in that one event or that one art. Others are willing to train in multiple disciplines under the track and field banner to become more diversified. And that's the analogy he gave in relationship to martial arts, and that's how his mindset worked with martial arts. And it was very, like I said, for the time, if you weren't Oriental, that was very controversial. And many people embraced his ideas and concepts and incorporated them. And in the 1980s, Joe Jennings, the founder of Panther Productions, was relocating from New Jersey to California and met up with David German and did a series of 4 instructional videos on the diverse arts that he taught. And again, these went from the Kenpo Jiu-Jitsu connection to the art of China, which he switched from Chinna. Again, Chinna means to seize and control. He switched the term Chin from seizing to Chi for energy, to control energy. And he incorporated the various physical aspects of the grappling arts and incorporated them with the metaphysics and the different mindsets that he was learning from different influences. Matter of fact, one of the influences he found fascinating was the founder of Out-of-Body Experiences. And he was reading that at the time, and he incorporated that into his grappling arts and the Chinese influence of Chinna as well as Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And it was funny because he would mention it, but he mentioned about it on his video, and I was like, what the heck is he talking about? And I was recently talking to different realms, going to astral projection and going to different realms and fighting different entities for their knowledge. I'm like, where the world is he getting this stuff? And then years later, again, if you're familiar with the popular New Age author Dan Millman, who wrote the Peaceful Warrior series, he has a wonderful book out called Divine Interventions, and he features different individuals that have been divinely inspired to become world-renowned. And one of the persons is this person who founded out-of-body experiences and talks all about this. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is like verbatim from David German talking about China or China. And I was like, okay, now I know what he got some of the metaphysical understandings and going into that particular aspect and talking about and incorporating that way, learning different breathing patterns and regulating chi and learning how to control it. So this was just one of the diverse understandings. Again, he also did series on explosive ground grappling for Panther. He also did an instructional tape on choking and strangulation. And David would reinvent the wheel in relationship to finding organizational ways to teach his art. For instance, in the art of choking and strangulation, this was a term that he had learned originally from Al Thomas, which was Taido. Now, of course, Tai from the Japanese means body, Do means way. For Al Thomas, he would use that as a series of systematic chokes and strangles. And David would elaborate upon that, and everything he based was in relationship to numerical understanding. For instance, in Chinna, there are 365 techniques. Well, there's 365 days in the year, so you learn one technique every day for a year. Now, the seventh day biblically is a day of rest. So that seventh technique in his Chinna form, which he took Chinna from as Jiu-Jitsu as a waza or technique, and created a form with it, a kata, where you could do these various grappling techniques in the air without a partner. And the seventh day or the seventh technique was a striking set or blocking set. And this was another influence he learned from the Chinese martial arts called Bai Jin Su, which is Cantonese for fast turning hands. And he would go forth the idea, and most of us in our basic technique influenced mind, we go, okay, my opponent does this attack, and then I block and I respond with this. So his opponent does this attack, and I do this. And he said, okay, well, we have to do a yin to yang. What if I'm the one who throws the attack and my opponent blocks me? Now what? How do I strike them or respond to that block? And he was influenced by systems like Wing Chun and White Tiger Kung Fu. Again, he's trained with the Wei Feng Du. Introduced him to the White Tiger system, or the White Eyebrow system, and the White Hair system, which are southern styles of Kung Fu, which go along that same path as Southern Praying Mantis, Wing Chun, Gocho Kuen, the Five Ancestor Fists, even to the Okinawan versions such as Wei Chi Ru. So, again, this was just one of the aspects where he would take various numbers. For Taido, he would use, I believe, 52 books, 52 techniques. And the 52 were a reference to the 52 weeks of the year. In another particular art, he used the numeric listing for the number of books in the Bible. And he would use this as a foundation to give the student a reference point so that they would have an understanding of a beginning and end, how many techniques they were going to learn. Now, whether or not they learned all those techniques from Mr. German depended on the amount of time you trained, the program you did, and this innovative format that he was doing became very popular. And after he left at Parker, he went to work with the Tracy's. And combining their business model with his art of Thai became very popular. It became very well known, and also his studios did very well during the Kung Fu craze. He had over 150 studios at that point in California and Colorado and all around the United States. And so it was really becoming very popular. And I asked him years later, I said, why did you stop it? He said, you know what? I had to go into a business meeting, and I had to you ever try to deal with 150 different egos? And he said, I just got so tired of just dealing with the controversy and the conflicts with different individuals. individuals and their egos. And he said, if he said some days I just wanted to, go out to the ranch, ride my horses or just get on a sailboat and go sailing out in the open ocean. And, I listened to the song Sailing by Christopher Cross, and that was David German. He just wanted to, he was a very free spirit. He was a person who was controversial in his mindset and attitude. He was a person who was always willing to put it on the line. I remember Steve Sanders telling me, obviously now Steve Muhammad, telling me a story and this really gave me perspective when I started working with David German. It was because of Black Pearl magazine articles, but going back to Steve Muhammad, he told a story when David German was a black belt and he was a white belt, which really gives you perspective into how long David was in the arts. And this one student was kind of copping an attitude. David's anger flared. He was all set to knock the guy right out right there in class. And he said, the guy was just a white belt. But David was so upset by what the guy was saying and doing whatever that he was ready to put it on the line right then and there. And that's just the way he was. He was always a person who was willing to take the martial arts and make it go. Let's see if it works. And let's see right now. And I remember we going back to the picture with Masayama, and David would get a smirk, for lack of a better term, on his face. And this look. And I was looking at him, and I looked at the picture, and I said, "You're sizing him up, aren't you?" He goes, "Yeah, I just taken him." And instead of like you or I would say, "I'm going to go to lunch," or "I'm going to go to the convenience store and get a six-pack." Here's David German saying, I can take a man who basically killed 52 bulls in his lifespan. And, that's the way he was. He was always a driven individual who wanted to test it. Can I take him? Can I make it work? I think I can do it. That's classic. I think I can attitude, the little train that could. That was David German.
Well, Joel, that's an excellent introduction and background on Mr. German. Very fascinating interview. I want to thank you for being part of the show today. This is definitely a gentleman that deserves his place in the martial arts history, not just of the United States, but in the world in general. And hopefully, Joe, we can get you back on the show in the future, and we can talk a little bit more about some of the legacy that Mr. German left behind and where his system is today.
Very good. Thank you very much for your time. Again, if you want to find out more about David German, look for the 4 videotapes of Panther Productions. Century now owns Panther, so check that out. Also go back to the Martial Arts Archives and look up Black Belt Magazine from January and March 1981, and also Inside Kung Fu in the mid-1980s. There were several articles written on Mr. German. And check out more about the legacy of David German and Thai Precision Action Incorporated.
Well, thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day, and thanks everybody for listening in.